Welcome to the show, folks. This is Wrestling Changed My Life. Here we go.
I filled up more passports. So I've been all over the world. And what you find is the things that drive people as a family and a country, they're the same.
We can endure anything and adapt and pivot and change. Wrestling gave us that ability.
I would say nothing in life has impacted me more than the things wrestling has taught me in terms of self-reflection, resilience.
Toughness. Some guys have it, some guys don't.
Adversity, 100%. How to pick myself up and be a man after I failed.
And everything that has shaped my life and where I'm at today would not be there without the values and basically the lessons I've learned through the sport of wrestling.
For me, wrestling saved my life because it allowed me to focus and channel my energy.
We're fortunate if you wrestled, because if you wrestled, natural talent helps, but it's 5% of the ingredient. It pales in comparison to heart and technique and effort.
It humbled me, taught me humility. Nothing can humble you more than wrestling. I think it's the learning to adapt, right? You learn how to adapt, you learn how to solve problems.
If I look back at my time I spent wrestling, if it gave me one thing more than anything else, it's mental toughness.
Ladies and gents, happy Friday from the Windy City. Coming to you a little bit late this week with our second episode, but nonetheless, it's here. We have Bruce Burnett, one of the great coaches of the past 30 years or so. Bruce has coached at 4 Olympic Games. He was the head coach at Navy for many years. He was the head coach of Team USA Freestyle for many years. But back in 1987 through 1990, he coached at Oklahoma State, and he had a chance to be around the great John Smith, the great Pat Smith, Kenny Monday, and I really had a fun time hearing about all these stories. So I hope you enjoy it, folks. Fan of the week goes to my man Nick George, who just had a son yesterday, and Nick brought a Wrestling Changed My Life t-shirt to the hospital to put in the baby's crib. I'm speechless. So Nick George, thank you, my brother. Wish you nothing but the best. Folks, if you want to support the podcast, please go to our online store. That's store.wrestlingchangemylife.com. I sound like a broken record, but you know what's there. The goods. You got the crew neck. It's crew neck season here in Chicago. T-shirts, hoodies. If you want to support the show, that's where you can go. Store.wrestlingchangemylife.com. And without further ado, folks, let me bring you Bruce Burnett. How did you first find wrestling back at North Bakersfield?
Well, actually, my high school coach recruited me into the wrestling room. And honestly, I saw a guy wearing a Letterman's jacket, and I thought to myself, oh, man, I'd like to get one of those Letterman's jackets as a freshman weighing about 100 pounds, and thought, I could take that jacket from that guy, and found out he was a wrestler. And the rest is history. The wrestling coach got me and really got me to like the sport, took me around and took care of me and helped me get through high school, actually.
What kind of kid were you before that? Were you kind of a ruffian? Were you a straight edge kid?
I'm going to say I probably missed a lot of school. I did like to surf a little bit, did like to fish a little bit, did like to do a lot of other things that didn't involve the classroom, I would say. So, but I love sports, football, wrestling, and baseball. So sometimes you have to do things you don't want to do to get things you want.
And you wanted to wrestle and participate in sports. So and a lot of people don't know this, but the California junior college system has its own state tournament. It runs in the fall. It's a pretty cool thing. How did you end up going there versus some of the more traditional four-year schools?
Well, a lot of it really had to do with my academics. So I did miss a lot of school. I was recruited by UCLA and Cal Poly and Fresno State. So the local schools were interested, but I'd just gotten married. I got married right out of high school, and easier to stay at home and progress from there. And it really turned out really good for me. God opened up a lot of doors. That's what I'll say.
How do you mean?
I mean, my whole career is pretty much divine intervention. I didn't I didn't apply for any of the jobs I had as a high school coach or a collegiate coach or the national coach. Those opportunities came knocking on my door, and I opened some of them and walked through the door. So, no applications for sure.
Wow, that's pretty cool. I mean, that just shows you relationships and doing the right thing are pretty much everything in this life.
Yeah, I'm going to say actually it's divine intervention. When I was a high school coach at Meridian, Idaho, and we'd been fairly successful, and our high school was going to split. And I was actually going to retire from being the head wrestling coach, become the head golf coach, head the PE department, and be semi-retired and let my 2 assistants go to the other 2 high schools and be the head coaches. And I did a clinic that spring in Lewiston, Idaho. And Myron Roderick, the athletic director at Oklahoma State University, was also doing the clinic. And 2 days into the clinic, he said, "Bruce, how'd you like to be the head assistant wrestling coach at Oklahoma State University?" And I said, "Wow, really?" He goes, "Yep. Leroy Smith's going to Switzerland, going to be their national coach or something. Job's going to open up, and how'd you like to come down there and be the head assistant at Oklahoma State?" And I said, "Wow, what's that paying?" He said, $20,000 a year. I said, "Myron, $20,000 a year? I make 45 now as a high school coach. I couldn't do that to my family." And he said, "Oh, I'll give you a car, gas credit card. And you can do camps." Said, you'll make more money than that." And I said, "Oh, Myron, I just can't do it." And actually we left it that way and went back to school. And our head football coach was really a good guy by the name of Bob O'Mara. I was telling him the story, and he goes, "You know what, Bruce? If the University of Oklahoma offered me a job on their coaching staff, I'd pay them $20,000 a year just to get on staff." And I said, "Well, maybe I ought to look into it a little more." And I called Myron and asked if he'd fly me down, look at the job. He said, "Yep." And again, the rest is history. Stepped in the door as a Oklahoma State Cowboy.
This just shows the personality of Myron Roderick in the sense that not many people would hire a head associate without the head coach being involved with that process.
Yeah, and honestly, I knew Joe, and I had told Myron that I knew Joe. I mean, when Joe was training and the head wrestling coach at South Bakersfield High School, and he was training for the world team, he would call me and a couple other high school wrestlers that were pretty good in the Bakersfield area, and we were his workout partners. And so early on, I mean, when I first was doing the clinic with Myron, I let him know that I did know Joe. But I didn't talk to Joe until after the time with Myron.
Myron seems like an interesting guy to work for. When Chesbro left in '84, it still kind of puzzles the mind how that all transpired. How would you describe Joe C. for folks who don't know him in terms of his coaching philosophy and his approach to the sport?
Well, Joe was pretty open in terms of letting people progress at their weight, their own time, their own abilities. But Joe was very intense, fierce competitor, really a nice guy, would do absolutely anything for you. But when you got in the arena, when it was time to fight, he was a fighter. I mean, he was a tough guy to say no to, so a fierce recruiter. But he was a tough guy. I mean, he really was. And but he also knew what his skill sets were, and he allowed assistants, I think, to use their skills. And he was never intimidated by anybody else doing anything. And so, he is a good man. And he did really care about his wrestlers a great deal.
That's the one thing about him in the sense that he allowed other guys to coach. A lot of great coaches are such control freaks that, in a good way, like you think about Bill Belichick, probably the biggest control freak of all time, and he really runs the show from top to bottom. He's pulling all the strings. Joe C. did not seem like that kind of guy. in the sense that a lot of people would run practice sometimes for weeks at a time without Joe even being there or even, coaching the practice. Is that what you remember?
Yeah, I'm going to say Joe was there most of the time, but
Okay.
when I first got to Oklahoma State in 1987, Myron Roderick was, he would drift into the room as the athletic director, but Tommy Chesbro actually got back on staff. And so when I first got there, it was Joe C., myself as the head assistant. Tommy Chesbro became the assistant, and he was going to be in the room if Todd was going to come to Oklahoma State, which Todd did. And then Mike Sheets and Kenny Monday were on staff. And so that's how I started off. Jim Shields was actually the equipment guy, but he also helped in the wrestling room as well. And so we had a huge staff, but as you can imagine, I was a high school coach walking into a room where John Smith had already won his first world title, and Tommy Chesbro was in the room, and Kenny Monday and Mike Sheets, and there I was, high school coach walking into the Oklahoma State office and going to work.
How did you manage self-doubt, if you had any?
Well, I'm not going to say it was self-doubt, but I did keep my mouth shut for about 3 or 4 weeks. But everything's a learning curve. And Tommy Chesbro was a great technician, really a great technician. What was funny was, obviously, and this was one of the problems I tried to address when I became national developmental coach, terminology in one part of the country is not the same as it is in another part of the country. It's either a headlock or a head and arm or a cowboy. They just called things, they were different names. And so there was a learning curve to get over that part of it. But technically, I paid attention and I learned a lot. I learned a lot from Tommy Chesbro. But after about a month or so of being in that environment, I thought I did see we had great athletes. We had Chris Barnes and Kendall Cross and Corey Bays. I mean, we had some really good athletes, and Kirk Mammon, but honestly, they couldn't clear a tie-up. There were some basic things that really had to come into play. And so I felt like the conditioning and clearing and controlling tie-ups, I mean, it's pretty easy to take down an Iowa wrestler the first minute, maybe, when you're fresh and you're slick. But after 5 minutes or 6 minutes of somebody pulling on your head and you're trying to hit the same shot, it's just not as effective. And so learning how to control tie-ups and getting in better shape and match preparation. And what I'll say is Tommy, after about a month, of running practice in his cowboy boots and his jeans, what a great guy, but brilliant. And, but I went in and I said, Tommy, I'm going to run practice here for a few days. And you come in and watch and he let me do that. And so him and Joe both, I mean, they talked, but he let me run practice for a week. And then after 2 weeks, he stopped coming in the room. And I was like, I'd go to his office, say, Tommy, come on back in the room. I want your input. He goes, no, you're doing good. Things are going well. But he would come in and check things out. And there you go. That's how Bruce Burnett got in the wrestling room.
Man, and just the talent level in that Oklahoma State room at that time, you alluded to it earlier, incredible when you consider the post-grads. Tell me about the perception of John Smith coming into the room your first day of practice in 87.
Well, obviously, John had already won his first world title. And so, I mean, you think to yourself, what am I going to do? What am I going to help this guy, And honestly, I learned probably way more from John than John ever learned from me in terms of wrestling. But I was a wrestling sponge. And so I got around John and wrestled with John a lot. I pretty regular. And John, the one thing about John, he didn't miss a workout. And even after he graduated, I mean, practice was practice in the college wrestling room, right? So he's there every day or 2 times a day. We'd drill in the morning and lift. And I mean, there's no secrets on what you have to do to really be successful. But John wouldn't miss. And more than once, it might be 9 o'clock at night, and I'd get a call, and this would be in the spring, and John would say, Coach, I had to go to Tulsa and do a clinic, so I missed my workout today. Do you think we get a little workout in? It's 9 o'clock at night. I'm getting ready for bed, and he's calling me to come down and get a workout in. And but that's the type of guy he was. He wasn't going to miss his workouts. He wasn't going to miss an opportunity to get better. And so there was a lot of learning. That's what I'll say.
How far along had the low single been perfected and developed at this point in time?
Well, you just didn't see it much. And so honestly, John Smith was a low single leg. But John's finishes, that's what really made him good at it. First if you look at his body type, his speed, his flexibility. So the low single leg and the way he was able to finish, those things became very important for him. And I had to learn that. But at the same time, gosh, I had access to so much that I never had as a high school coach. Video, be around the very best wrestlers. It's not like today when you can go online and you can find any technique you really want online today. Mm-hmm. And you can watch any wrestler in his prime or in his, and honestly, I learned the counter to a low single leg of going over the top actually from a North Korean. Did it to John, and that's how I learned it. Somebody finally countered it a little bit, and the guy was pretty good with it coming over the top. But wrestling evolves. Wrestling's a constant progression, and you see a lot of the techniques evolve, and everything grows, and that's why I would tell elite athletes, look, you can only learn if you choose to learn. And some people get stuck in this little ball of, I've done this is what I do, and I'm really good at it. Mm-hmm. And they better keep getting better. You have to keep getting better in this sport of wrestling if you want to really be successful. And that's as a coach or an athlete. Constant growth.
How did John Smith embody that? Was he someone you constantly saw improving?
Oh, yeah. I can promise you this. John Smith got better at something every year. He wasn't the same guy from a world championship to a world championship to an Olympics. He got better. He got better on top, or he got better on the bottom, or he got better with his takedown techniques. The one thing people they forget about John Smith didn't get scored on very often. He had great hips. Him and Pat both had great hips. Leroy Sr. and Mom did a good job because they had actually incredible hips, and they were hard to score on. Flexible, powerful hips, and his counter offense was good. But at the same time, John got a little better at something every year. Every year he was better on top
his top game got incredible at the end there.
Yeah, he worked hard on it. I think probably he had some influences. Dave Schultz was a beast. As Dave was getting older, everybody understood that maybe he's not as good on his feet, but man, if he gets you down on the mat, you better be ready. And that progression, I think, John, he's observant. He wanted to be the best and worked at being the best. And so he studied, watched people, how they progress and score. And he just got better every year.
And now you talk about good hips. A guy who comes to mind with maybe the best hips of all time, Randy Lewis. 1988, John and Randy. I just got chills saying it because I love this matchup. John and Randy meet a number of times in the spring of 88. Before we get to the matchups, what did Randy Lewis represent as a competitive threat to John in the 88 quad?
Well, I mean, everybody can look at the history and Randy and Iowa and Oklahoma State and all those variables, but that's irrelevant. What it was somebody was in John's way in terms of making the Olympic team and being the best he can be. And I think John did lose in the spring of '88 at the national tournament. I think it was called the national tournament then, a long time ago. But I can tell you this, I know Dave Bennett really well, and worked with Dave Bennett a long time in putting our video together on the national team. But that night, John, you didn't have to look for John to get him to come watch video of his matches. John went to Dave Bennett that night, said, let's watch this, let's find out. And after he did, he basically told Dave, he said, that'll never happen again. And it didn't, student of the sport, hated to lose and worked at getting better so that it didn't happen again. I mean, it's that, and honestly, that's what separated him, even on the elite level, in terms of he was a self-motivator. And he studied the sport, and he understood that if he got beat, he wanted to know the reason why he got beat and how he could fix the problem. And so many athletes today don't go about fixing the problem. That's why a guy like me can be successful in this sport. It's not rocket science. How did you get beat? Well, the guy scored more points than you. Well, I didn't sleep good. I don't care. He still scored more points than you. How did he score the points? Find out how he scored the points. Stop him from scoring the points next time. How did you score on him? Oh, you didn't? Well, let's figure out a way to score on him. I mean, that's the process. And you have to go about fixing the process every time because, again, it's evolution and everything's constantly moving. And you just have to keep getting better.
And that's how, John, I've interviewed him twice for this documentary. He said that, when he came off the mat, he knew why he lost 99% of the time. And that match in Topeka that you're alluding to, John did come upper body the one time in the match. Randy threw him for 3 and Randy ended up winning that match. And so it's just, it's just such a small world that in 84, Randy and Leroy were going at it at the same weight. And then in 88, for John to get his first Olympic berth, he had to vanquish one of his brother's, big rivals.
Yeah, but again, I think it was anybody that gets in the way of somebody achieving what they're on a mission to do. And make no mistakes about it, John was on a mission. And I'll tell you a little story about 1992. I was a statistics guy, and so I knew John had only wrestled like 12 or 13 times leading up to the 92 Olympics in the entire year. Clinics, training, so many things at the time. And I just asked John before he was getting ready to go, John, are you ready? Are you ready to win? And John looked at me and he said, you know what, Bruce? I'm going to win. It may not be pretty, but I'm going to win. And honestly, it wasn't pretty, but he won. And he did it the hard way.
That 92 games, those first 2 matches came down to the last 10 seconds.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, I think the lack of matches maybe impacted his game on, but you talk about in a pinch. And then, of course, Reynoso, when he was, okay, I'm going to give you a story. Here's some pressure. So this is my first Olympics, 1992. I didn't make it over the 88 Olympics. Somebody had to stay back at Oklahoma State and work. And so we're in the corner. Leroy and I are in the corner with John. And they have this flurry and something happens and they go out of bounds. And this is late in the match. And John goes out of bounds by our corner. And he looks at Leroy and I and he says, if I lose this match, am I still in the gold medal match? right there during the match in our corner. And I knew the scenario. I knew it. I mean, that's the stuff you do as a coach. You knew that if he didn't get pinned or tech falled, he's going to be in the finals even if he loses the match. Well, when somebody looks at you right there at that instant during the match and asks you that question, and Leroy looks at me and I'm like, yes, you're still in, but go win this match. And he goes back in, he gets crotch lift. Reynoso was good at it. And then the rest is history. He comes back and win. But I about broke out in a cold sweat. And that's truth. You know, like, what if I got this wrong? You know, pretty big deal, you know.
Oh my
first
God.
Olympics. Yeah.
How do you think going into that match, you know, and I do want to talk about John's first two matches with Reynoso back in 90, but going into that match, do you think that impacted John's openness in terms of how he wrestled, knowing that he just couldn't get pinned?
I don't think John even paid attention to that going into the match. John just went to wrestle the match. I don't remember ever talking to him about, you know, don't get pinned, don't get tech falled, you're going to win. But obviously it came to John's mindset during the match. And so I think he knew, but he wanted confirmation, and there was no way he's going to get pinned or tech falled, you know. But he's the one who took the chance to score, and Reynoso got over the top on him, and he did the same thing when they were in Cuba. So Reynoso was really good with that crotch lift. And
were you in Cuba the first time he got beat?
I was. I happened to be there on that trip with him. So
thank you to the wrestling gods. Tell me about what every memory you have of that situation, because not many people were there.
Well, honestly, so here's the deal with Cuba. First off, the time of the year that wrestlers go down there, usually it's cold at home, and they get to go to Cuba. And I hate to tell this really, but I'm going to say 60, 70% of those guys that go down there are pretty big on buying some cigars and bringing them back. And so it's not the most difficult of all the international tours that you can take. That's what I'll say. You know that I think Italy would be there and Canada was at the tournament, but really you went down there to wrestle the Cubans because they were the toughest ones in the group. And so it wasn't the toughest of tournaments. That's what I was going to say. So I don't think the mindset going down put them in the frame of mind that how important it really is. Now, obviously they go down there and they want to win, but at the same time, it's not like going to Krasnoyarsk or Tbilisi or one of those other tournaments where everything that you do is hard. I mean, honestly, we were pretty concerned about whether or not we were going to get lobster after the matches, you know, a guy selling lobster on the beach. And so it was just a different mindset. But we were surprised. I was surprised by Reynoso. I didn't know he was that good. And John was surprised. And so he knew. I can't even remember how many times he actually ended up wrestling Reynoso, but it was a pretty big deal every time. I mean, it was a battle.
Yeah, they wrestled, I count 4 times, the Pan Ams, the Grands, so 90, just to kind of pull the curtain back, of the documentary, 1990 is a season we key in on because John's first match of 90, or first tournament of 90, he gets beat by Reynoso. And he kind of has this period of like a week or two where he's doubting, is he going to even wrestle in 92, right? Does he still have it? And he decides to commit to it. He wins the 90 Worlds in Tokyo, and then he beats Reynoso at the Grands, and then he's back on. You know, he's committed to 92. Did you ever have a doubt that John would wrestle through the next quad?
You mean through 92?
Yeah.
Honestly, I didn't. I mean, my concern was I watched him train 87, 88, 89, 90, you know, and he had a lot of other things on his plate. And I think he got first off, you live pretty meagerly, as an elite athlete, especially back then, and so, and all of a sudden he's able to make some money and do some things that he wasn't able to do before. I think that draw hurt him a little bit. And I think he made the effort actually to, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to go back to doing what it takes to really be good. And he did. He didn't need anybody to tell him that, right? I mean, he was, once he set his mind and he knew he was going to do it, he was all on board about going about and doing it. And he worked hard. He would never be out conditioned. He just wouldn't allow it to happen. Technically, obviously, he's as good as anybody in the world. And in top, bottom, his counter offense, his whole game was really good. But the one thing people forget is the rest of the world is really good. Really good. And, there's 4 or 5 people in the world on any given day can beat our best guys. It's just the way it is. And if you're not up to your game, if your preparation isn't right, if your study isn't right, if you get caught up in the hype and all the other things versus getting back down and focus on what it is that you really have to do to take out the bad guys, you get caught. And I've coached 4 Olympics. I've seen it on different levels, and it's heartbreaking. It really is, to watch somebody get to a certain point and make a mistake because they get caught up in the hype, or they miss their training, or they're not focused in on the thing. And you never had to worry about John in that sense. He was on a mission, and he was going to take care of business. It was always take care of business first.
And in the 90 Worlds in Tokyo, John teched everybody. But coming out of it, he still felt that he had some unanswered business because Reynoso held that win over him. How do you remember the match at the Grants going in Pittsburgh that year, if you were there?
You know what, Ryan? I don't remember the match. So I know this. I know Reynoso was really confident, especially after the match in Cuba. And of course, their whole country was pretty excited about what took place down there. And it put Reynoso on a different stage, I think, on the world level as well. But Reynoso was no slouch on the rest of the world. I mean, he was really good. And so, but I think the matchup too, what his skill set was versus what John's skill set was and what he did. And I mean, it's pretty hard to lift those hips. But Reynoso's flexibility and what his best skill sets were versus what skill sets John were, so I don't know. It's just a matchup, and Reynoso had a good crotch lift, and John to shoot that low single, and he got lifted a couple times, and that was basically the matches.
And then, after that kind of rebound where he refocuses himself, he wins again at 91, and then John is named the co-head coach. How much did that play into John's distraction heading into the 92 Olympic trials, having to coach at the same time?
Well, I think clearly it impacted him. I left in 1990 to become the national developmental coach for USA Wrestling. And so I wasn't around him on a daily basis like I was prior to that, through 87, 88, 88, 89, 89, 90. And so watching him train, but that's how I got back to the question about, are you ready? Are you, he goes, yeah, I'm going to win. It just may not be as pretty, and that's what happened, but I was actually, honestly, on the Greco staff and the freestyle staff in 1992. So my first Olympics, and it was, it was a big step, you go from a high school coach to head assistant at Oklahoma State to national developmental coach to national coach. It quite the journey.
I was going to say, if someone would have told you August 1, 1987, that in 5 years you're going to be the head Olympic coach, you probably would have said, you're crazy.
Well, something like that, except, God opened up doors. I can't talk about divine intervention any more than that, and with all the opportunities that I had and the people that I was around and the things that I was able to learn. And look, the interesting part about this, I got to work with John Smith. I got to be in the room with him and wrestle with him and touch him. And I'm going to tell you another story. So because I wrestled with John a lot, I was one of his workout partners, but I told Mike Sheets one day, I said, I think I'm going to really try to beat John today in a match. He wants to go 3 or 4 matches today, and I think I'm going to really try to win. And that doggone Mike Sheets went and told John, and John beat me like a drum. And I looked over in the corner, and I saw Mike Sheets just smiling. I don't think John had ever beaten me that bad, but boy, I think Mike told him, and I really took a beat down on that day. But John could do that. He could turn it up and turn it on, and everybody, Dave Schultz was, he was a beast on top. Dave would hurt you. He'd get that turn. And John was pretty ruthless too. John would put the hurt to you if he thought it'd get you to turn over a little bit. But no, it was, there's probably 10,000, not 10,000, but 1,000 coaches out there that, given the opportunity I had, probably would have known more, but they didn't have the opportunity. When you start looking at the 80s and 90s, you just didn't have the video. When I traveled the world to scout all the people, I traveled carrying a video case and 3 cameras, one for each mat, and set them up. And first off, how often do you see North Korea? You don't see them. You got to go to the Asian Games. You want to see the North Koreans. They have to qualify for the Olympics because you don't see them in the Worlds. And you don't want to be surprised by somebody that's really good out there that you're not prepared for. And so back then you had to carry a video camera around and go to the Asian Championships, wherever they were at, middle China, to watch the North Koreans compete. And so that's what wrestling I was able to do, was travel and
you would do that? You'd go to those Asian Games?
Oh yeah. Yep. I would go to everything. And I would go, look, first off, Fadzayev in 96, I saw him working out in the practice room. Now I'd seen him the spring before, 200 pounds and not taking care of his body, to 8 months later in the wrestling room, wrestling to beat the band. And I went back, and I think Joe C was with me at the time, actually, and I told him, I said, hey, he's going to compete in the 96 Olympics. I don't know who he's going to wrestle for, but I'm telling you right now, he's going to compete. And so started paying a little more attention to Arsen Fadzayev, and sure enough, he wrestled for Uzbekistan then. So I would go to the practice rooms and see who was cutting weight hard, who was working out, who looked good, who wasn't, I tried to get there early and take in all I could. And knowledge is a good thing, right? Especially when the little things can really make a difference in a big match. And so, yeah, I got to travel around the world and go watch video, and had a whole bunch of those big old thick VHS tapes.
Man, what a cool thing to do that. And you talk about watching the North Korean, and we alluded to it earlier. I don't know if it was John's first or second match. The Korean came out lower than I've ever seen anyone wrestle, like lower than John even. So what did you pick up on some of those films to help John prepare for that crotch lift that he threw on him?
Well, John did a really good job in his preparation by himself. And Of course, Leroy was helping him a great deal too. So in his preparation for the crotch lift and stuff, and if you go back and you really watch John's technique evolve and what he did with his hips, and if a guy got in a crotch lift position and setting out and then being able to set through and post lift, I mean, he created some different finishes for those situations. But there's enough can't be said about situational training. That's what I'll say. And so putting yourself in a position where somebody has a good crotch lift with you, and how do you counter that? And where do you put your head? Where do your hips go? What do you? It's a constant evolution, and John was really good at that, by the way. And honestly, I'd love to study that as well too. I mean, this is a position you got beat in. How do you fix the position? What are some options? What can we do? How do you beat this position so that you prepare the next time? Mm-hmm. And you didn't have to tell John to do that. He was going to do it. He's going to watch the video and solve some problems.
What about after? Let's go to the trials. John Fisher. I mean, I'm sure you were there. It's kind of a junior question, but what happened in those 3 matches? What do you remember from those?
You know what, Ryan? I'm having a hard time bringing them back because here's the end result. John wins, at the end. But Fisher was a beast. It wasn't like John Fisher wasn't good. I mean, he was good on the NCAA level and international level. And we just had a whole bunch of really good wrestlers. And John, he lost 1 match, but it was just really hard to hold John down. When he set his mind to do something, and if he got beat, he'd come back with a vengeance. He'd chase him down. He'd go, you know what, I suspect if he could, he'd go to the practice room and try to wrestle him for an hour if he could. Just to learn and progress and get better. And so, but that's what you have to do. I mean, he didn't lose many times on the big stage. He was definitely the man.
And if you think about during this whole time, Pat was also coming up. So did you coach through the 90 season, Pat's first title?
Yes. Yeah. Interesting, right? I mean, we've got Jeff McAllis, who I think was ranked 5th in the deal. But honestly, Pat wanted to wrestle. His family wanted him to wrestle. And I can remember the wrestle-offs with Jeff, and there was no question. I think 7-2 was probably the closest match between Pat and Jeff. But at the same time, Joe was pretty good about this. He gave Jeff a chance to compete in the NCAA tournament and let him go transfer to another school at Christmas time, and so we had to get all that stuff done early, right? I mean, in that interim of, Pat, if you're going to do this, we got to make it happen. Let's get the wrestle-offs. Let's get it done. Get regular officials. I mean, get them in set the mat out in Gallagher-Iba, everything. It's not done in the wrestling room like a lot of programs. I mean, you'd put the mat out on the Gallagher-Iba floor, had officials come in and officiate the wrestle-offs, and there was no question that Pat was able and capable. That's what I'll say. I mean, there really was no question as to whether or not he was capable of winning, even in his freshman year. There was none in my mind anyway. And even though we go out to Portland and he gets pinned, again, you solve the problems. You just fix the problems. Dan Russell was pretty doggone good.
Really good.
It's not like, he went out and he's not very, Pat just loses. Well, he lost to a really good guy. He got caught and he got pinned. And how do we address that? He's our guy. Let's go to work. let's get better. Let's fix the problem. Let's get better every day. Let's do something that makes you a little bit better so that doesn't happen the next time. And gosh, I was obviously I left in 1990, but what an opportunity to watch Pat grow and win year after year after year. And then actually I had him on a couple of international tours when I was national coach. Always fun, great personality, always has that smile, you know. Pat always could lighten up a room. So, but when he got on the mat, he was pretty doggone intense.
I was just going to ask you, how would you describe his progression and change from his first day freshman year to winning the nationals as a true freshman?
Well, first off, we had a really good room. I mean, it would be interesting for you to talk to Chris Barnes, the two-time NCAA champion for us, and see how many takedowns he got against Mike Sheets and Kenny Monday, you know, the first couple of years he's in the room. And so that's the kind of room it was, so that if you wanted to be put in your place, there was somebody in the room that could put you in your place. And if there wasn't, there were two guys waiting to put you in your place, you know. And so there was a constant evolution, and honestly, that's a balance too, right? I mean, how much do you want somebody to wrestle Kenny Monday in the room? And not daily. The day you're going to wrestle him, you better strap that headgear on really tight, you know, and you come in and you get ready to go. And it's an all day thing and a night before thing. You don't all of a sudden at 3:00 for a 3:30 practice say, you know, I think I'm gonna wrestle Kenny today. You know, that's not a good thing to do. You know, you better be thinking ahead of time on what you eat and what your warm up is and what your preparation is, and really. And so Pat had those opportunities and those days that he could challenge himself at any given time on any given day. And as a coach, you watch that too, because there's certain days you separate them or you change it up a little bit on who he's going to compete against that day, even in practice. So it's a constant work, constant progress, and constant growth and preparation, you know.
When you mentioned Chris Barnes, when I was interviewing Pat, he actually said, you know, after he lost to Russell in the two matches, he came back and started to really take off. But, you know, Chris Barnes might score 30 takedowns on him in a single practice, but Pat might get one, and Pat hung on to that and built confidence from that.
Yeah. Well, first off, the size difference was considerable, but their skill sets were so much alike in terms of heavy hips, high crotch, duck, slick. I mean, Chris Barnes, he was slick, big guy. And but boy, he had those great, huge hips, you know. I can't emphasize that enough when you think about, you know, what a skill set it takes to be really, really elite. And they had that. But yeah, no, Pat's a freshman. He's competing against a national champion. That's a 177-pounder, and Pat's a 158-pounder. And old Chris, he could put it on you too. You know, he was really good. And you know, Chuck Barbie was in the room. And
Jim Shields is adamant that Todd Chesbrough got the best of Pat most times as well. Like, they would really go hard.
Yeah. Todd was pretty good.
Yeah.
Pretty technically sound. You know what? There was a lot of pressure on Todd, and there was a lot of pressure on Pat. And honestly, I looked at that as, hey, let's get back to doing what we do and having fun doing it. I mean, we can work hard, but we can have fun doing it too. And that was my main thing in that room, was to try to get those guys to, hey, let's get back to wrestling for the reasons that you wrestle and you love that part of it. But let's take some of that pressure off and let's just get ready to wrestle. I'll get you in shape. You're going to get in shape if you do the things we tell you to do and compete the way you can compete in the room. And yeah, that's why Pat may not get a lot of takedowns on Chris Barnes, but he got back up and got in the arena, and Chris wasn't about to just give him a takedown. I mean, you're going to have to earn it in the room. And but at the same time, afterwards, it's okay to say, hey, boy, you sure got crushed today. What are you going to do about it tomorrow? What do you think? Maybe you circle the other way. Maybe you can control his lead hand. If you do that, you're going to shut him down a little bit. Let's just shut him down a little bit. Don't give him so many.
And like, so that's the back and forth. That's the ebb and flow of that season. And going into the Nationals in 1990, Pat was the number 1 seed, but he was still 0-2 against Russell. So I kind of feel like Russell got, I know he's a D2 guy, so that doesn't always pan out in the seedings, but, that had to be in Pat's mind a little bit going into that semifinal match against Russell.
Well, sure. I mean, but again, it's the preparation and the confidence that you get over the course of a season that allows you to do that. But if you're going to think that Pat wasn't nervous, he may tell you he wasn't nervous, but he knew the situation, the scenario, and but he was ready to wrestle. You always go at the end of the year and you work backwards. Pat was a lot better in March than he was in December. He was a lot better. And all those beatdowns in the room with Chris Barnes or Mike Sheets or Kenny Monday, other people don't get that. You don't get tested like that on a daily basis. And when you get in those rooms like that, I've tried to tell elite athletes, you got to get out of your room. You got to get out of your room every 6 weeks at minimum to test yourself. If you wrestle the same 3 guys every day for weeks and you get to where you beat them, they get to where they don't compete as hard. You got to get out and test yourself on a regular basis. Well, I'm telling you, Pat was able to be tested on a daily basis from when he got in the room until the NCAA semifinals and on. Yeah, that schedule, that training, all those things that add to that edge, and that's what elite programs do. You got to have the training partners, and you got to have the schedule. And if you don't have the training partners, you can't be successful on the schedule. And it takes a combination of the two. And then probably the third thing is the coaching. That's the third thing, And again, not rocket science. Well, how did you get beat? Fix it.
Right.
And on a daily basis, that's what it was for Pat. And so, was he prepared? Absolutely, he was prepared. And the room and the schedule and the coaching and the history, it all came together.
And how rare was it back then for a true freshman to win the Nationals?
Well, I don't think it had happened very much. Maybe 1 or 2 times, maybe 3 times. I don't even know the history of it, but there were a lot of things, the red shirts, freshmen couldn't compete as freshmen sometimes. There were a lot of great wrestlers. And but think how hard it's been. You have Kel Sanderson and Logan and Dake. It's not a room full of people, is it? Has been a 4-time champion. That's a tough feat. Just think about being sick one day or one time, or whatever the issue is, your preparation wasn't exactly like it should have been. There's so many variables that could take a guy out, or not, maybe not take him out, but he's not 100%. You see it all the time with really, really good guys, whatever it is. You got tired, you stayed up too late, you got up too early to go do media stuff. You should have been thinking about your rest and your preparation. Get Put everything else away until after. Dang. Not before, after. And we did a good job of doing that.
Especially when
controlling that.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I'm just going to say that's what we did in terms of his preparation, in terms of keeping him away from all the media, and he's still going to have it. There's somebody coming up to him and saying, "Hey, good luck, man. I know you haven't beaten him, but you don't want to hear that. Let's keep him away. Let's keep him away a little bit." Yeah.
And that was before, that was his first title. And so the pressure really starts piling on after that. And I know you had left shortly after that, but, how soon do you think the talk of, oh crap, Pat could be the first to win 4 started after he won that first one?
Like right after he won the first one. Like, holy cow, this guy could be the first 4-time national champion, because you've got to win the first one before number 2 comes around, before number 3 comes around, before number 4 comes around. And just think about that over the course of time. And then, of course, the sanctions came in, so he had another year in there with his preparation and the nervousness of it all, and everybody else is getting better. They're not sleeping. Somebody's out there wanting to take that title away. Somebody else wants to be a national champion. Sean Burnett, I guarantee you, he went into that match. He wanted to win. I know Sean, and I guarantee he was geared up. He was ready to win. And but that's the thing: preparation and the room and the schedule, everything that gets you prepared for the big stage.
Yeah, you think about the guys Pat had to go through: Dan Russell, Tom Ryan, maybe one of the best finals matches that I can remember, Ray Miller, and then the guy from Wisconsin whose name's escaping me right now. Matt
Demaray. Matt Demaray.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, he is a good one too.
I mean,
good guy. Yeah, gosh, I forgot about Matt. He is a good man.
He's incredible. And then, I mean, Pat's senior year, he had Joe Williams, who went on to be one of the greats. He took a 7th at that bracket. Loaded, just loaded.
Yeah.
How would you compare and I know we're winding down, not so much about John and Pat, but, you've been at, how many Olympics did you say you've been at?
4 Olympics.
And, how many NCAs? Who knows, right? A lot. How would you compare the environment and build-up of an Olympics versus an NCAA tournament?
Wow, that's a good question, because it's all relative. It's where you're at, what your goal is. Again, in this great sport of wrestling, I'm going to tell this to all the athletes out there again. I've told many. Too many of them think they're going to start on September and get ready for March. And you got to reverse all that. An NCAA athlete has to go to March and work backwards in your preparation on where you have to hit your peaks, where you have to hit your timing, what you have to do to get better. And there's constant change, constant. It has to be evolution in terms of, you can always find the problems. You can always find them. When you wrestle a tough guy, you're going to find it didn't all go great, even if you won. I mean, how did he score on you? How did he control the tie-up? What did you do? How can I get better? What can I do to be a little bit better the next time I wrestle this guy versus how I perform this time? And so, gosh, it's just what a sport in terms of constant evolution and solving problems. And I even think back to my days at the Naval Academy, where maybe you don't have a 3 or 4-time state champion. You got a 1-time state champion. He's going to wrestle a 4-time state champion that's a 2-time returning All-America in your schedule, and you know you're going to have to wrestle him 3 times over the course of the year, and your first time you close that gap, right? I mean, just look at it. You close the gap. You go, wow, you got beat by 10, then you got beat by 5, and I guarantee you wrestle him the 3rd time, that guy's thinking, you know, this guy's, he's getting a little tougher here. And then all of a sudden, maybe you win 5-4, or maybe you lose 5-4, but that's the progression. I don't care what your skill level is or what your skill set is or the preparation in terms of getting ready for your toughest matches. It's a process. And so whether it's the Olympics or it's the NCAAs or it's the World Championships, I mean, a lot of people can say the World Championships are harder because you don't have to qualify and you may have to wrestle more guys and there's more tougher guys. But I promise you this, your toughest guys are tougher in the Olympic year than they are in the world year. Bar none. The whole world gets better prepared for every 4th year. If you don't believe that, you just look at the Russian system and who they have the first year after the Olympics, the 2nd year, the 3rd year, and the 4th year. That whole process is to get the best guy that they have ready for that 4th year, everything. And I didn't know that when I first started either, but that's the way it is. You better be ready on that Olympic stage.
And you talk about the stakes being high, and I'm getting excited just hearing you talk about it. You know, an Olympic gold medal is obviously a tremendous feat. And for people listening to this documentary when it comes out in January, who maybe aren't super familiar with the freestyle scene and the international scene, what does it mean for one of these Eastern European guys to bring home an Olympic gold medal to their country and to their family?
Well, that's their first off. That's a way out. That would be their professional sports, their NBA star. They're the person that can win an Olympic medal and become a national hero. And they do become national heroes. I've seen it in Iran to Russia to Japan. It doesn't make any difference. When you win that Olympic gold, that puts you on a pedestal and you are a national hero at that point. And so financially, I would say socially, but country's pride is a huge thing. It is. Unfortunately, our society right now isn't focused like it should be, but it should be one country and one gold medal and one effort by the entire country to be the best. And so those other countries, it's a way out. I've seen it. I've been to Vladikavkaz and watched little kids, elementary school kids, come in before school and go through a practice with their senior coaches. Then the seniors come in after that. And then after school's out, I see the little kids come back in before the senior practice with the senior coaches, doing the same drills, the same techniques, it's the same. And then the seniors come in and they do their training. And those personal coaches, it's a day for them. They're not drinking as much coffee as we are in between sets, They get those little kids in and they're going to work. They are going to work.
And it's different when it's the national sport. Like you talk about Dagestan or Ossetia, the Ossetians, they love their fighters, their wrestlers.
Yes. And that's the pride of the community and the region. And it's pretty exciting to actually see and to know some of those guys. So it's exciting.
Super exciting. Last 2 questions for you. This is a quick one. I just want to know, since 92 is your first Olympics, what jumps out to you when someone says Olympic Village or someone says Barcelona, what comes to mind for you from that first experience for you?
I've got to be honest with you. Barcelona was the funnest Olympics for me. And here's why. I was an assistant coach. So I had this list of things that I had to get done. and get prepared for. And I did it to the fullest and the best of my ability. But when I could put that list away and go see another event or go into the village and hang out with the lead athletes from all over the world, and it was way different than when you're in charge of all the other athletes and trying to keep them not to do the things I did in Barcelona, right? Let's focus, because freestyle wrestling, unfortunately, is the last event every Olympics. Those athletes never get to really enjoy the games. And the ones that try to enjoy it, they don't fare as well as they should have. That's the bottom line, because they're too caught up into the hype, and they should be getting ready for weigh-ins, their competition. Everything's taken away. It wasn't good to hang out in the village with athletes that were done competing. It just wasn't. And so it's still about, what was your goal? Let's accomplish the goal. If the goal was to get inside the Olympic Village and be around Olympic athletes, and probably you're not going to fare so well on the stage. It's all about performing on the stage, letting everything else take care of itself after. In wrestling, it's the last sport every day, last day of the Olympics.
Really? I didn't know that.
Freestyle wrestling. Last week. Yep.
Wow.
Yep. As a matter of fact, I think guys can be competing at 4:00 in the afternoon, the last day of the Olympics, before opening ceremony or closing ceremonies that night. So there's a lot of work to be done that last day.
Wow. Last question. The name of the podcast is Wrestling Changed My Life. Naturally, wanted to ask you, Mr. Burnett, how has wrestling shaped and molded your life?
Well, wrestling for me has just been such a blessing. I mean, you can't even start to imagine the people that I've met, the places that I've been. I filled up more passports. So I've been all over the world. And what you find is the things that drive people as a family and a country, they're the same everywhere. People are the same. Now, I think politicians get in the way a lot of times in the course of the world, but you meet the wrestling community all over the world, and it's the same. You care about your family, you care about taking care of your family, you get up, you go to work, you take care of your kids, and wrestling taught me that. It taught me that life is just not that hard. Wrestling, that's hard. Day in and day out. But living with faith, that's the key.
Awesome.
Gotta love it.
Oh man, I like people like you who have an enthusiasm for the day. Like you seem like a guy, you wake up excited for every day.
I've got to say, I'm on this mission right now to get better as a golfer, and I am pathetic. but I work at it. I study video. I took lessons. I'm getting better. But
have you gone to golf school yet?
Golf school. I have golf tech. It's good because they video your lessons. You can go back and get it. You download it. You have it all the time. You can go back and say, why is that ball going in that direction? And you can figure it out. That's the key.
So you're an obsessive person like the rest of us, huh? You're watching film. Not a lot of people are having that kind of level of detail. I love that.
Yeah. I have to say, my wife gets a little, you watching golf again, First off, golf's an expensive sport.
Yeah.
So I'm glad my wife worked hard as an educator. It's good. Awesome. Ryan, it's been fun. Really fun.
It's an honor, sir. Thank you very much for your time. I wish you nothing but the best. Hopefully we'll get to meet in person here if things ever go back to normal.
Yeah. What a good job you do for the sport. Good job, Ryan. You have a great day.
Appreciate it. You too. And all great things must come to an end. If you want to hear more from the podcast, text WRESTLE to 555-888. That's WRESTLE to 555-888. You can also find us on Instagram, Wrestling Changed My Life, Twitter, Ryan_N_Warner, as well as our website, WrestlingChangeMyLife.com. Take care of y'all. 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 Take care of y'all.